The Middle East is once again standing at the edge of a dangerous and unpredictable escalation as Iran has reportedly launched multiple ballistic missiles toward Israel in what is being described as a direct and calculated retaliatory response, with Israeli military officials confirming that missiles were fired from Iranian territory while assessments regarding casualties and structural damage are still unfolding. At the same time, international media outlets are reporting that Iranian MiG-29 fighter jets have taken to the skies, signaling that Tehran's reaction is not limited to rhetoric but has shifted into an active military posture, dramatically increasing the stakes because ballistic missiles are strategic weapons capable of causing large-scale destruction within minutes rather than serving as symbolic warnings. Adding further tension to the situation are earlier reports suggesting that sensitive areas in Tehran, possibly linked to senior leadership or strategic command centers, were targeted, although Iranian sources insist that top leadership figures were moved to secure locations in advance, dismissing speculation of successful high-value strikes and framing the narrative as resilience rather than vulnerability. Meanwhile, previously stated U.S. objectives toward Iran, including demands for zero uranium enrichment, restrictions on missile range, dismantling of regional proxy networks, and preventing nuclear capability, have intensified pressure on Tehran, with conversations around regime change continuing to circulate in strategic discussions, creating a volatile mix of military confrontation and political maneuvering. Negotiations are reportedly still being discussed behind closed doors, yet on the ground and in the air, preparations appear to be accelerating, raising urgent questions about whether this exchange will remain a limited retaliatory cycle or evolve into a broader regional confrontation that could draw in additional powers and reshape the security. As tensions continue to intensify, the strategic implications of Iran's response are becoming more complex and far-reaching, with analysts closely watching whether Tehran's missile launches mark a limited show of force or the beginning of a sustained military campaign designed to redefine deterrence in the region. The reported deployment of MiG-29 fighter jets suggests layered preparedness, missile capability backed by aerial defense and potential offensive positioning, indicating that Iran is signaling readiness for escalation rather than a one-time reaction. Israeli defense systems are now under pressure to intercept incoming threats, and every interception or impact will shape the next move on both sides. Beyond the battlefield calculations, the political dimension adds another layer of volatility: demands previously outlined by U.S. leadership, zero uranium enrichment, reduction of missile range, dismantling proxy alliances, and strict limitations on nuclear assets, are seen by Tehran not merely as negotiation points but as red lines that challenge national sovereignty and strategic doctrine. This raises the risk that military pressure could harden positions rather than soften them, especially if leadership targeting or high-profile infrastructure strikes are perceived as attempts to destabilize the regime internally. Historically, external attacks often consolidate domestic unity instead of triggering political collapse, which means expectations of rapid regime change may not align with ground realities. Meanwhile, reports of ongoing diplomatic contacts suggest that parallel tracks, negotiation and confrontation, are unfolding simultaneously, a dangerous combination where miscalculation can override diplomacy within hours. The central question now is not only how forceful Iran's extended response might be, but whether regional actors and global powers will intervene directly, transforming a bilateral confrontation into a multi-front crisis that could disrupt energy. The confrontation is now evolving into a high-risk strategic standoff where every move carries consequences far beyond immediate battlefield impact, as Iran appears determined to prove that any direct strike on its territory, leadership structures, or strategic infrastructure will be answered with calibrated but visible force, reinforcing its doctrine of deterrence through retaliation rather than restraint. The reported launch of ballistic missiles toward Israel, combined with MiG-29 fighter jets airborne, signals layered military readiness that goes beyond symbolism and enters the realm of sustained operational capability, while Israeli defense systems remain on heightened alert, calculating interception rates and potential counterstrikes that could target missile launch facilities, command nodes, or critical defense assets inside Iran, raising the possibility that this cycle could expand rather than stabilize. At the same time, political objectives previously articulated, zero uranium enrichment, strict limitations on missile range, dismantling of proxy networks, and prevention of nuclear advancement, continue to shape the broader strategic environment, but applying military pressure to achieve these aims risks hardening positions instead of compelling concessions, particularly if leadership targeting or high-value infrastructure strikes are perceived internally as existential threats. Diplomatic channels may still be active behind closed doors, yet the coexistence of negotiation and active military signaling creates a volatile atmosphere where miscalculation, misinterpretation, or a single high-casualty event could rapidly override dialogue. Regional actors are closely watching, aware that escalation could disrupt energy routes, maritime security, and economic stability across the Middle East, potentially drawing additional powers into what began as a direct exchange. The coming phase will likely test not only military capabilities but strategic patience and crisis As the confrontation intensifies, the region is entering a phase where strategy, perception, and timing may prove more decisive than sheer firepower, because Iran's reported launch of ballistic missiles toward Israel, combined with MiG-29 fighter jets taking to the skies, signals not just retaliation but an attempt to restore deterrence credibility and demonstrate that any strike on its territory or leadership structures will carry consequences, while Israeli defense systems remain on maximum alert, calculating interceptions and weighing further preventive action against missile infrastructure and strategic facilities, creating a volatile environment where each side frames its moves as defensive necessity rather than escalation. At the same time, previously outlined demands including zero uranium enrichment, limits on missile range, dismantling of regional proxy networks, and strict controls over nuclear capability continue to shape the political battlefield, yet applying military pressure to enforce these objectives risks hardening positions instead of producing concessions, especially if leadership targeting or high-value sites are perceived internally as existential threats that require extended response. Diplomatic contacts may still be active behind closed doors, but the parallel existence of negotiation and active military signaling creates a narrow margin for error where miscalculation, misinterpretation, or a single high-casualty incident could override diplomacy within hours. Regional actors are watching closely, aware that further escalation could disrupt energy corridors, maritime routes, and broader economic stability, potentially drawing additional powers into what began as a direct exchange, meaning the coming days will test whether calculated retaliation can remain contained or whether mounting pressure, strategic pride, and security fears will push the crisis beyond controllable limits into a wider and more destructive regional conflict. Now the world stands at a decisive crossroads as this confrontation moves beyond headlines into a defining geopolitical moment that could reshape the balance of power across the Middle East, because with ballistic missiles already launched, fighter jets airborne, defense systems activated, and strategic objectives openly declared, the margin for miscalculation is thinner than ever. Iran appears determined to show that pressure will be met with force, while Israel remains equally firm in preventing long-term strategic threats from materializing, creating a high-stakes environment where retaliation, deterrence, and political messaging are unfolding simultaneously. And although diplomatic back channels may still exist, history shows that once military momentum builds, stepping back becomes politically costly for all sides. The key question now is whether this cycle remains a calibrated exchange designed to send messages, or whether a single unexpected strike, leadership targeting incident, or infrastructure hit will trigger a wider regional escalation that pulls in additional powers and destabilizes energy markets, maritime security, and global economic stability. Every move from this point forward will not only influence immediate battlefield outcomes but also long-term negotiations around nuclear restrictions, missile programs, and regional alliances. This is a rapidly evolving situation, and your perspective matters. Drop your analysis in the comments and tell us how you see this crisis unfolding. If you value in-depth breakdowns without noise, make sure to like this video to support the content, and subscribe for continuous updates and sharp geopolitical analysis as this story develops in real time.